Hello, this is Brian. Today is Friday, October 21st, 2022, and I'm here at Crestridge Ecological Reserve near Harbison Canyon, Crest, and El Cajon here in San Diego County. It is time today for a very long-awaited Spotlight on Trees video. And we're going to be focusing on a rare native species of oak, only found in Southern California and maybe northern Baja California. It's this here, the Engelmann Oak. And here we have it, Quercus engelmannii. The Engelmann Oak is a small to medium-sized tree. Sometimes with age it can get quite decent sized, usually under 50 feet tall. But there have been some species that have gotten over 60 feet tall. And being an oak, it is a member of the Beech family, the Fagaceae, which is home to the beeches, the chestnuts, the chinquapins, the oaks. So here we have the beautiful Engelmann Oak. This tree here has a very small distribution, scattered in very concentrated groves from around Pasadena at the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains, to a couple spots in Riverside County, one or two spots in Orange County, and several spots here in San Diego County, also in southwest Riverside County. But it is a very rare species of oak. So the Engelmann Oak is it evergreen? Is it deciduous? Is it in between? What is it? Well, let's see. The answer is going to be quite complicated, because Engelmann oaks can be almost all of the above. Now, if they're deciduous, are they shedding their leaves? Are they fall deciduous, like shedding their leaves in fall, leafless in winter? Are they drought deciduous? Can they be a combination? Well, the best answer is that they can be a little bit of both. But they can also be semi to fully evergreen, depending on where they're growing. So Engelmann oaks are typified by these bluish grayish green, relatively kind of thick leathery leaves. Common adaptation to Southern California's dry climate, where they are subjected to long periods of rainless weather. And that will definitely play into what I'm going to talk about with the ones that are deciduous or evergreen. So Engelmann oak leaves are fairly small, medium size, sometimes a little wavy edge, sometimes maybe a couple teeth along the edge of the leaves. More of a bluish grayish green on the top and a pale green underneath. You see here. And these are fairly small trees here. These are relatively smaller trees. As you can see, that light bluish gray green cast is what gives these away as Engelmann oaks. Engelmann oak. So they can be confused by the novice plant observer with the much more common, much more ubiquitous coast live oak, which in this area is Quercus agrifolia variety agrifolia. So I'm going to start off by showing you some coast live oak leaves so you can get an idea of what the difference is between the leaves before I go into more specifics with the Engelmann oaks. So coast live oak leaves are close to the same size, but you notice they're much more oval, they're a richer green color, they're a little shinier on the top, and you notice that they're cupped. The leaves are cupped downward. So these leaves are, this is called being revolute. These leaves are revolute. See the midrib, and then they're kind of curled like an upside down cup. Kind of like that. And for the most part, coast live oak leaves are cupped. They're revolute, just like that. Now some of the leaves in the shadier branches might be flatter and larger. Some of the leaves are not quite as revolute on some of these coast live oaks, as you can see here. But, again, they're a richer green color, and they're a little bit shinier on the top. Engelmann oak leaves are not shiny on the top. So, again, this is Quercus agrifolia, variety agrifolia, the coast live oak. And sometimes Engelmann oak will grow with the other coast live oak, the southern coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia variety Axiodania. So now we're going to go look again. Here's more of the contrast. Dull, not shiny, grayish blue-green leaves on Engelmann oak. So now let's go look at some of the other aspects of Engelmann oak. So like a lot of the white oaks, and Engelmann oak is a type of a white oak. It is in the section Quercus, or Lepidobalanus. And a lot of the white oaks are characterized by light silvery gray bark that is moderately furrowed, as this tree is here. This is what the bark of Engelmann oak looks like. Sometimes the bark can be a little bit more plated, especially on younger specimens. Here's a younger Engelmann oak right here. You can say it had kind of like more checker-shaped furrows, but a lot of the older trees have a little bit of a deeper furrowing on the bark. You see here, longer ridges and slightly deeper furrows on more mature trunks. Let's compare that with the coast live oak again, because you will often find coast live oak and Engelmann oak in close proximity. A lot of times growing right next to one another. Again, that's an Engelmann oak. That's a coast live oak. Coast live oak trees have more of a brownish gray, a little bit deeper color on more mature trunks, lightly checkered, very showerly furrowed plates on some coast live oak trunks, to very widely furrowed trunks here. So this is a coast live oak, more widely and shallowly furrowed than your Engelmann oaks. And for contrast, coast live oak is a red oak in the section Lobatai/Erythrobalanus. Okay, so that's enough talking about the coast live oak. This video is about Engelmann oak, so let's go talk more about our Engelmann oaks. So the stature for an Engelmann oak is typically a fairly small, medium-sized tree, and as you've seen here, some of them are single-trunked, and some of them are multi-trunked. That's quite common for a lot of our oaks here in Southern California, coast live oaks included, California black oaks, canyon live oaks, and these are oaks over different lineages. So the one I showed you here has more of a multi-trunk aspect. So being that it is a white oak, these trees have their acorns ripen in one growing season. So the acorns that's got the female flowers that got fertilized this spring, here in 2022, are now starting to ripen now in October 2022. So these acorns will be ripening this year. They ripen in one growing season. That's very typical in the white oak group. So let's see if I can find some acorns. I want to show you some acorns. These trees do have some acorns in them. As you can see here, the acorn cups are quite small. Small, quite shallow. The acorns themselves are pretty small. They get a little bit bigger than this. But they're kind of stubby. And kind of rounded, quite small. Shorter than coast live oak acorns, which tend to be longer and narrower. But Engelmann oak acorns tend to be a little stouter and more rounded. Let's see if I can find some better examples. I'd like to find some in the tree. See if I can find some on the end of these branches here. I know some of these trees have acorns. Let's see. Bear with me. Try to find a good example of some developing acorns right now. I know I saw a couple. I can kind of see a couple here and there. Here we go. Here's a developing acorn right now that looks like it's been kind of compromised. They can get a little bit bigger than this. Again, a little more rounded in shape. A little more rounded with a very small, kind of golden, lightish brown acorn cup. So the acorns are quite small on Engelmann oaks. There we go, there's an acorn right there that's just ripened. That's fairly typical size for Engelmann oak acorns. And again, they ripen in one growing season. Here we go. Here's one still developing. Slightly larger acorn cup, but usually not a huge acorn cup on the Engelmann oaks. So, now, here we go. So some of you who live in Central California and Northern California, around the foothills of the Central Valley and the Sierras, say, this kind of reminds me of a type of oak we have out here called the blue oak, Quercus douglasii. Engelmann oaks are relatives of blue oaks, Quercus douglasii, and you can check my spotlight video on the blue oak from last October. And they're kind of similar. They got that bluish, grayish, green cast of leaves. Small acorns that ripen in one growing season. And very similarly colored bark. The bark is very similar on Quercus douglasii. Very similar. But the Engelmann oaks tend to be a little more spread out, even more spread out, and more low growing, and typically a little bit smaller than blue oaks. So, now it's time to talk about, are these trees evergreen? Are they deciduous? Are they drought deciduous? Are they winter deciduous? What's the deal? Well, Engelmann oaks do often have a tendency, and this depends on where they're growing, to shed their leaves in drought conditions, especially in the driest, more upland areas where they're often found growing. Engelmann oaks typically prefer upland sites, typically upslope from coast live oak. Coast live oak is typically found more in the canyon bottoms, and Engelmann oaks are typically found upslope from them. However, as you can tell here, that's not always the case. We're kind of in a low bottomland right here, where we have both coast live oak and Engelmann oak growing together, and that's also quite common. Now, coast live oak tends to like the canyon bottoms a little bit more. They like access to moisture. They're fully evergreen species of oaks. Coast live oaks keep their leaves year-round, whereas Engelmann oaks they can start shedding their leaves in very dry conditions, especially the ones that are on the more exposed hillsides, where they'll grow in the middle of grasslands, and they're called oak savannas when the oaks are very widely spread out on grassy hills. They're called oak savannas. And a lot of times those oaks are more subject to the drought than the oaks growing lower down in lower canyon spots like this one. So that's why these trees still have a very rich green canopy of leaves. So the ones that grow in these canyon bottoms closer to the coast live oaks, where there's a little bit more access to moisture, will tend to stay evergreen, keep their leaves all year round. Ones on the hillsides might shed their leaves during the summer and fall dry season, and they might lose anywhere from some of their leaves to nearly all of their leaves, depending on the severity of the drought and the location where the oak tree is growing. And I've seen this before, and there are some areas around here, upslope, up in the chaparral, where there are some Engelmann oaks growing up on the hillsides, where they have shed more than half of their leaves. So a lot of times what's supposed to happen is when they do that, they'll shed their leaves any time during the summer months, and then they will go partially leafless to nearly completely leafless, or maybe sometimes fully leafless, and they will stay that way until springtime when the new leaves come out. Now, for the ones that tend to keep their leaves year-round, they do have a leaf shedding period during the springtime when new leaves are coming out, old leaves are coming off. So sometimes they call it tardily deciduous, late deciduous. Sometimes during late winter and early spring, right before or as the leaves are breaking bud, the new leaves for the new growth period, a lot of times the old leaves will shed off. So they do have sometimes a spring deciduous factor when they're in moister canyon bottoms like this. So a lot of these leaves will be shed during the spring while the new leaves are already coming out. But the ones that tend to grow higher on the hillsides and more exposed sites will tend to shed a lot more of their foliage during the summer months and fall months, and will go at least partially to mostly leafless during the course of fall and winter, and then hopefully the winter rains will be enough to stimulate them to grow again in the spring. So leaf retention on Engelmann oak is very complicated. So that's why I had to take some time to sit here and try to explain what I mean by this tree can be evergreen, it could be fully deciduous, it could be partially deciduous, it can shed its leaves in summer and fall, it can shed its leaves in spring. But the ones that tend to shed their leaves in spring are the ones that are leafing out at the same time. So for the most part, the tree will be with leaves on it pretty much the whole time. So there you have it. Quercus engelmannii. If you want to know some really good places to see this tree at its most common, well, this area, it's got quite a few of them. But if you want to see some really old Engelmann oaks, a great place to go is near Temecula. It's near Temecula, it's not that far from Lake Elsinore. It's called the Santa Rosa Plateau Ecological Reserve around the community of Murrieta. What you do is you take Interstate 15, get off on the exit for Clinton Keith Road, and follow that, follow that for a good few to several miles, and you'll find Santa Rosa Plateau. It also has a lot of mixture coast live oak and Engelmann oak woodlands, and it also has the example of what I was telling you about the grassy hillsides with very widely scattered Engelmann oaks called the oak savanna. There's really not much of an oak savanna over here for me to show you. It's right here because it's mostly mixed coast live oak and Engelmann oak. But there are some very old Engelmann oaks there. There are also some very large and old coast live oaks there too. So that's another good place to see coast live oak get really old, large, and gnarly. But again, that's probably one of the best populations of Engelmann oaks you're going to find. There are other places here in San Diego County you'll be able to find them. I believe Daly Ranch near Escondido is supposed to be another spot with great Engelmann oak woodlands. But there you have it. Spotlight on trees, Engelmann oak, Quercus engelmannii. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed recording it. And I'll see you on the next Spotlight. Thanks for watching.